What if I told you that the broccoli you've been steaming, the garlic you've been cooking whole, and the mushrooms you've been eating raw are delivering a fraction of their actual protective power? That the way most people prepare these foods destroys the very compounds that make them worth eating in the first place? I know that's uncomfortable to hear, because you're trying, you're buying the right foods, you're eating your vegetables, you're doing what you were told. But here is the problem that almost nobody explains. Eating a healthy food and activating its protective compounds are two entirely different things. And the difference between them is not a matter of which foods you buy. It is a matter of what you do with them before they reach your plate. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor, and in my years working with patients over 60, one of the most consistent things I've observed is this: people who eat well still develop the diseases they were trying to prevent, not because the foods don't work, because they never learned how to unlock them. Today, I'm going to change that. I'm going to explain exactly what is happening inside the foods you already eat. I'm going to show you why most preparation methods neutralize the most powerful compounds before they ever enter your body, and I'm going to give you specific, practical techniques that take no extra time and no extra money that can dramatically increase the protective value of what you are already putting on your plate. This is not about eating more, it is about eating smarter. Write your country in the comments. And if you're new here, subscribe and turn on notifications. I make these videos every week for people over 60 who want evidence-based information about how food actually works in the body. Let me tell you about Margaret. She was 71 when she came to see me, and she was doing everything right by conventional standards. Broccoli 3 times a week, garlic in almost every meal, a diet full of vegetables and whole grains. She had been eating this way for 15 years because she had a strong family history of cancer and she was determined to protect herself. What she didn't know was that her preparation methods were undermining almost everything she was trying to do. She boiled her broccoli until it was soft. She added garlic directly to a hot pan the moment she started cooking. She ate her mushrooms raw in salads. And she had been doing all of this consistently, dutifully for years, believing she was protecting herself. Each of those habits was canceling out the very benefit she was trying to get. "I've been doing this for 15 years, she said when I explained it to her. "Why did nobody tell me this before?" That is the question I hear most often when I have this conversation with patients, and it is the question I want to answer for you today. The mistake most people make with healthy foods. Before we get to solutions, you need to understand the biology of what is happening. Because once you understand it, the techniques I'm going to give you will make complete sense and you will never forget them. Many of the most powerful protective compounds in plant foods are not sitting there ready to be absorbed. They are locked inside the plant in an inactive form. They need something to trigger them, to convert them from their raw, inert state into the biologically active form your body can use. Without that trigger, you absorb almost nothing of what makes these foods worth eating. Think of it this way. Imagine a combination lock sitting in front of you. Inside that lock is exactly what you need. But without the correct combination, the contents are completely inaccessible. The food is the lock. The compounds inside are the treasure, and the preparation technique is the combination. The most important example of this is broccoli. Broccoli belongs to the cruciferous vegetable family, which includes cauliflower, cabbage, and Brussels sprouts. These vegetables contain a compound called glucosinolate. By itself, glucosinolate is interesting, but not particularly powerful. The truly remarkable compound is called sulforaphane, and sulforaphane does not exist in the plant. It has to be created. Sulforaphane is produced when glucosinolate comes into contact with an enzyme called myrosinase. In an intact, living broccoli plant, these two compounds are stored in separate compartments of each cell, like two reactive chemicals kept in separate containers for safety. They never touch. They never react. No sulforaphane is produced. When you cut or chew broccoli, you break those cell walls. The compartments mix. Myrosinase meets glucosinolate. Sulforaphane is created. Your body absorbs it. It goes to work protecting your DNA, reducing inflammation, and triggering a process called apoptosis in abnormal cells, essentially instructing damaged cells to self-destruct before they can become something more dangerous. This is one of the most sophisticated protective mechanisms in all of human nutrition, and here is how most people destroy it entirely. They put the broccoli directly into boiling water. Myrosinase is extremely sensitive to heat. The moment it hits high temperature, it is deactivated. You have destroyed the enzyme before it could complete its work. You have removed the only tool capable of converting glucosinolate into sulforaphane. You eat the broccoli, but you absorb a tiny fraction of what it could have delivered. This is not a minor difference. Research has shown that properly prepared broccoli can deliver 10 to 30 times more sulforaphane than broccoli that has been boiled without prior preparation, the same vegetable. An enormous difference in what your body actually receives. The same principle applies to garlic. Garlic contains a compound called alliin and an enzyme called alliinase. When you cut or crush garlic, alliinase converts alliin into allicin, which is responsible for garlic's pungent smell and most of its documented health benefits. If you cook garlic whole, the enzyme never activates. If you chop garlic and throw it into a hot pan immediately, the heat destroys the enzyme before the conversion can happen. The garlic smells good, it tastes good, but the allicin was never formed. Understanding this changes how you see your kitchen. It is not just a place where you make food taste good. It is a place where you either unlock or destroy the protective potential of what you are eating. The technique that changes everything. Chop and wait. The solution to the broccoli and garlic problem is almost embarrassingly simple. It costs nothing. It requires no special equipment. It adds no meaningful time to your cooking. It is called chop and wait. When you are preparing broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, or any cruciferous vegetable, chop or cut it as you normally would. Then stop. Do not cook it immediately. Set it aside on your cutting board and leave it for a minimum of 40 minutes. If you can give it 10 to 15 minutes, that is already meaningfully better than cooking it immediately. 40 minutes is optimal. During that waiting period, myrosinase is actively converting glucosinolate into sulforaphane. The enzyme is doing the work it was designed to do, uninterrupted by heat. Once the sulforaphane has been created, it is significantly more stable than the enzyme itself. You can then cook the broccoli, and you will retain a dramatically higher proportion of its protective compounds than if you had cooked it immediately after cutting. The same technique applies to garlic. Crush or finely chop your garlic. Wait 10 to 15 minutes before adding it to heat. During that window, alliinase converts alliin into allicin. Once allicin has formed, it tolerates heat far better than the enzyme does. Add it to your pan after the waiting period and you preserve the benefit. I started telling patients about this technique several years ago, and the response is always the same. They cannot believe something this simple was never explained to them before. Margaret, the patient I told you about at the start, incorporated both techniques into her daily cooking within a week. It takes less time than I spend deciding what to watch on television, she told me. There is no excuse not to do this. There is no excuse not to do this. One additional detail that makes this even easier to integrate. You can chop your broccoli or garlic in the morning and refrigerate it. The enzyme activity continues at refrigerator temperature, just more slowly. If you chop your broccoli in the morning and cook it in the evening, you have given myrosinase hours to work rather than 40 minutes. The sulforaphane content will be even higher. Many of my patients now chop their weekly vegetables on Sunday evening and store them in the refrigerator, which saves time during the week and maximizes the protective compounds in every serving. The mushroom secret. Why cooking is the activation key. Now, I want to tell you about mushrooms, because mushrooms represent a completely different situation. With broccoli and garlic, the problem was that cooking was destroying the enzyme too quickly. With mushrooms, the problem is the opposite. The most powerful compounds in mushrooms are locked behind a wall that your body cannot break down on its own, and the key to unlocking them is heat. Mushrooms, whether button mushrooms, shiitake, cremini, or more exotic varieties, are extraordinary organisms. They contain a compound called ergothioneine, which some researchers have described as a longevity vitamin. Ergothioneine is a rare and unusual antioxidant that, unlike most antioxidants, can be recycled and reused in the body rather than being consumed and depleted. It concentrates specifically in tissues that are under high oxidative stress, which is exactly where protection is most needed. But the most strategically important compounds in mushrooms are beta-glucans. Beta-glucans are large, complex carbohydrate molecules with a remarkable ability to modulate the immune system. And here is the critical word, modulate. They do not simply stimulate the immune system, which could actually worsen chronic inflammation. They train it. They make it more precise, more targeted, more effective at identifying and eliminating abnormal cells. Research has shown that beta-glucans specifically activate natural killer cells, which are a specialized class of immune cells whose primary function is to identify and destroy cells that have become cancerous or virally infected. Natural killer cells are one of your body's primary defenses against tumor development. Beta-glucans effectively increase their effectiveness and their activity. Beta-glucans have also been studied for their effects on angiogenesis, the process by which tumors build their own blood supply. A tumor cannot grow beyond a small size without establishing new blood vessels to feed itself. Compounds that inhibit this process, called anti-angiogenic compounds, effectively starve a growing tumor of the resources it needs. Beta-glucans have demonstrated this effect in multiple research models. Here is the problem. The cell walls of mushrooms are made of chitin, the same hard material that forms the shells of insects. Your digestive system cannot efficiently break chitin down. If you eat mushrooms raw, the cell walls remain largely intact, the beta-glucans stay locked inside, and you absorb a small fraction of what the mushroom contains. Heat breaks chitin down. Cooking mushrooms ruptures those cell walls and releases the beta-glucans into a form your body can absorb. This is why cooking mushrooms is not just about making them more palatable. It is a biological necessity if you want to receive their most important benefits. Sauté them in olive oil with garlic that you have already waited the 10 minutes for. Roast them in the oven. Add them to soups and stews. Any form of cooking that applies sustained heat will do the work. 2 to 3 servings per week of cooked mushrooms is what I recommend to patients who want to incorporate this into a consistent practice. Robert was 74 and had been eating raw mushrooms in his salads for years, believing he was making a healthy choice. When I explained what his digestive system was actually receiving from those raw mushrooms, he was genuinely frustrated. "I've been eating them for nothing," he said. He switched to cooked mushrooms 3 times a week. "I can't measure what it's doing for me," he said at a later appointment, "but knowing I'm actually getting the benefit makes a difference." The 3 stages of cancer and the foods that fight each one. I want to give you a framework that will help you understand why the combination of foods matters as much as the individual foods themselves. Researchers generally describe cancer development in 3 stages, and when you understand what happens at each stage, you understand why certain foods are protective and exactly when that protection is most valuable. Stage 1 is initiation. This is where the process begins, at the level of DNA. Every day, your DNA is exposed to damage from free radicals, environmental toxins, and the byproducts of normal metabolism. Your body has repair systems that correct most of this damage. Initiation occurs when a mutation affects a critical gene, a tumor suppressor, a gene that normally puts the brakes on uncontrolled cell division. When that gene is damaged and the repair system fails to correct it, a cell with a dangerous error is created. The fire has been lit. At this stage, the most valuable nutritional strategy is antioxidant protection. Antioxidants neutralize free radicals before they can damage DNA. The colorful pigments in fruits and vegetables, the polyphenols in green tea, the ergothioneine in mushrooms, the vitamin C in citrus, all of these compounds are working at this stage as protective shields around your genetic material. Stage 2 is promotion. A single initiated cell is not a cancer. For cancer to develop, that cell must divide and create copies of itself. This process, called promotion, can take years or even decades. It is a long window of opportunity to intervene. Chronic inflammation is the most powerful driver of promotion. An inflamed internal environment tells abnormal cells to grow. Hormonal factors matter here as well, particularly insulin. A diet high in refined carbohydrates and sugar keeps insulin levels chronically elevated, and insulin functions as a growth signal for many types of abnormal cells. At this stage, the strategy shifts from protection to suppression. Sulforaphane from cruciferous vegetables, properly prepared using the chop and wait technique, is one of the most studied compounds for its ability to induce apoptosis in abnormal cells at this stage. It essentially reactivates the self-destruct mechanism in cells that have lost it. Stage 3 is progression. When a cluster of abnormal cells grows large enough to require its own blood supply, it begins releasing chemical signals that instruct the body to build new blood vessels toward it. This is angiogenesis. Those blood vessels provide oxygen and nutrients to the tumor and eventually become the pathways through which cancer cells travel to establish new colonies elsewhere in the body, which is metastasis. At this stage, anti-angiogenic compounds are the most strategically important nutritional tools. Beta-glucans from cooked mushrooms, EGCG from green tea, resveratrol from berries, curcumin from turmeric. These compounds interfere with the signals that tumors use to build their blood supply. They cut the communication lines between the tumor and the body's vascular system. The reason a diverse, plant-rich diet is protective is precisely because different foods act at different stages. A diet that includes cooked mushrooms, properly prepared cruciferous vegetables, berries, green tea, and turmeric is not a collection of random health foods. It is a multi-stage strategy that addresses cancer development at initiation, promotion, and progression simultaneously. This is why no single food, however powerful, is sufficient on its own. The protection comes from the pattern, from building a daily diet that deploys multiple compounds against multiple vulnerabilities in the disease process. The 16 foods that work in your favor and how to use them. Let me give you the specific foods and the key point about each one that makes it worth including regularly. Garlic and onions feed the beneficial bacteria in your gut, which produce a compound called butyrate. Butyrate reduces inflammation in the colon and has been shown to induce apoptosis in colon cancer cells. Use the chop and wait technique with garlic every time. Cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, Brussels sprouts. Always chop and wait 40 minutes before cooking. This single change transforms these from ordinary vegetables into functional medicine. Green tea contains EGCG, one of the most studied anti-angiogenic compounds available from food. 2 to 3 cups per day, brewed at around 80 degrees Celsius rather than boiling water, which can degrade EGCG. Berries, blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. Rich in anthocyanins and ellagic acid, both of which have demonstrated anti-angiogenic and anti-inflammatory effects. Eat them regularly and eat them whole rather than juiced. Turmeric contains curcumin, one of the most potent natural anti-inflammatory compounds identified in research. Always combine it with black pepper. The compound in black pepper called piperine increases curcumin absorption by up to 20 times. Without black pepper, most of the curcumin passes through unabsorbed. Cooked tomatoes. Cooking tomatoes increases the bioavailability of lycopene, a carotenoid with particularly strong evidence for protective effects against prostate cancer. Tomato sauce, roasted tomatoes, tomato soup all deliver more lycopene than raw tomatoes. Whole grains, oats, quinoa, brown rice. Their primary mechanism is fiber, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria, reduces transit time in the colon, and supports production of butyrate. Legumes, lentils, chickpeas, black beans. Another exceptional source of fiber and plant protein, with additional phytochemicals that contribute to the overall protective pattern. Fatty fish, salmon, sardines, mackerel, rich in omega-3 fatty acids, which reduce the chronic inflammation that drives tumor promotion. Aim for 2 to 3 servings per week. Walnuts and flax seeds. Walnuts contain L-glutanins that are converted by gut bacteria into urolithins, with anti-inflammatory and potentially anti-proliferative effects. Flax seeds contain lignans with particular evidence for protective effects in hormone-sensitive cancers. Cooked mushrooms, as we discussed in detail, 2 to 3 servings per week, always cooked to release beta-glucans. Dark chocolate, at least 75% cacao, rich in polyphenols with antioxidant and anti-angiogenic properties. A small amount daily is genuinely supported by evidence. Citrus fruits. Beyond vitamin C, they contain flavonoids like hesperidin and naringenin, with demonstrated anti-inflammatory effects. Extra virgin olive oil. Contains oleocanthal, which has anti-inflammatory properties similar in mechanism to ibuprofen. Use it raw on salads and cooked food rather than at high heat, which degrades its polyphenols. Seaweed, particularly kombu and wakame. Contains fucoidan, a compound being actively studied for anti-tumor properties. Available dried in many grocery stores and easy to add to soups. Pomegranate. Among the most concentrated sources of L-glutathione of any food, research has shown particular promise for prostate health specifically. You do not need to eat all 16 every day. The strategy is rotation and combination. A lentil soup with turmeric, black pepper, and cooked mushrooms on Monday. Roasted salmon with broccoli prepared using the chop and wait technique on Wednesday. A handful of berries and walnuts as a daily snack. Each meal becomes a deliberate act of creating an internal environment that is less hospitable to disease. Think of your weekly eating pattern as a schedule of deployments, different foods, different days, different protective mechanisms working across the full week. The consistency over months and years is what builds a genuinely protective dietary pattern, your 14-day challenge. For the next 14 days, implement 2 changes only. First, every time you prepare broccoli, cauliflower, or garlic, use the chop and wait technique. Chop it, set a timer, wait. Second, eat cooked mushrooms at least 3 times over the 14 days. Sautéed, roasted, added to soup, any method that applies heat. 2 changes, no new foods, no complicated recipes, no extra time. At the end of 14 days, come back and leave a comment telling me whether you noticed any changes. Digestion, energy, anything. Some shifts are noticeable. Others are happening at a cellular level that research consistently shows are protective over time. Dorothy was 69 and skeptical. I'm not going to feel my cells being protected, she said. She was right. But 3 months later, her inflammatory markers had decreased meaningfully. I can't prove it was the mushrooms and the broccoli, she said, but nothing else changed. That is how this evidence works. It accumulates quietly. The cost is 40 minutes of waiting and 3 servings of cooked mushrooms per week. If this video gave you something useful, share it with someone over 60 who is trying to eat well. They are probably making the same mistakes Margaret made for 15 years. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm Dr. Jake Taylor. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.